Put yourself in a position where you have worked so hard to achieve your goal. However, you work so hard to achieve this goal and you finally reach the top, where it is all a matter of winning. However, in this process of you working so hard, you get to the top and then you verse that one person that will determine whether you are the best in that competitive sport maybe, or whatever challenge it is. And for some reason, you don't win. Now this might hurt, but the topic here is transgenders in sports. I use this analogy to give an example because this happens a lot in sports when transgenders and their cisgender counterpart are playing competitive sports, and the cisgendered person is training their whole life and very hard just to have a transgender take that place from them. In this podcast, this is a very controversial topic. However, it is controversial in what the people choose to say about this topic. This podcast will analyze and question how one feels about transgenders participating in sports, their inclusion and their exclusion. Welcome to the first episode of Transgender Athletes Participating in Sports. My name is Nick Pereira, and as usual, I'm here by myself. And today we have a very good topic to wrap our heads around, something that has been in the news in the past couple of months to 2 years. And this is transgender athletes participating in sports. And just as this is something that has become a bigger story in the past couple of weeks as it ever has. And this is because of the competitive sports that are coming up. And the reason why this is becoming a big topic is because of a New Zealand weightlifter who is a transgender athlete, looks likely, although we still don't know, to be picked for the Olympic team. Therefore, that could affect the outcome for whatever competition that results on. And the most famous transgender athlete is Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner, and he used to hold many championships. And now he comes out as supporting that transgender athletes should not be competing in competitive sports. And the New Zealand weightlifter is significant because that would be the first case of a transgender woman participating in the Olympic Games. And people in this area have had their eye on Hubbard for about 3 or 4 years now, because now formally given, she transitioned in her mid-30s, and she has been a successful regional weightlifter competing for New Zealand in Pacific Games, for instance, and winning medals there. And there are many photographs where this transgender woman is at the top step, and actually people turn away instead of, it is like a silent historic protest. And this transgender woman is not supposed to be participating in these sports. And on a massive stage like the Olympics, the questions are the fair advantages and the retention of male advantages even after transition. And this is not an athlete I would like to look at, specifically because she is a specific athlete. And I prefer not to speak about a specific athlete. However, and the bigger issue here is the evidence of lowering of testosterone, which by transgender regulations typically prescribed, which would be you have to lower your testosterone to be considered for sports, which was almost ineffective on continuing the differences on male and female hormones. However, once the testosterone has gotten one to the place that they want to be, the degree of change varies from 0 all the way from things such as heights and the way the human body looks. When one suppresses the testosterone, it is changing the DNA of the person. The changes that occurs when one decides to lower their testosterone is minimal, however, not so minimal at the same time. The testosterone suppression does take away certain advantages. However, when you look at body mass, lean mass, there is no evidence that lowering testosterone takes these away. And as a result, elite male and female athletes will not compare to the result of the outcome of the sport. However, I would like to go back to a certain topic discussed earlier in this podcast, which is the participation of transgender athletes in sports. Let's take a look at what Dr. Kailas Brodus has to say about this.
Advantage of trans females against cisgender or non-trans females. I think there were 2 in the whole United States that actually play sports. There are more transmasculine, meaning people that look like me playing sports, and there were maybe 5 of those people. Because trans youth have a lot of fear about being attacked, just as trans adults do. And so they're working through all their other issues, as well as dealing with doctors and so forth. And so we're not very forthcoming or trusting of other people. So to be out with a sports team or a coach that doesn't understand us and to not be with our parents who can protect us is not something we're just going to jump out there and do. So what has happened is this whole syndrome of we are creating this to solve a problem that doesn't exist. And here are my theories on that. One, the last administration used this as a wedge issue, even though they didn't want anybody to attack their child that was underage. It was fine to attack other children. And what better children to attack than trans youth? Secondly, it had to do with the whole Olympic issue with Samia Castor, who is intersex, and there is intersex means that you're born with mixed and or ambiguous genitalia, and therefore they kept checking, assuming that she was doping up to beat people, and she was not, and the Olympic Committee saw that time and time again. And then thirdly, it's an attack on the current Biden-Harris administration, because I had the fortune of working with the Obama administration and VP Biden. Did I say Obama? Yeah, Obama and then VP Biden at the time. And neither of them had a curve on this issue. They understood who trans people were and are, and President Biden actually proceeded in announcement, although the Obamas were organizers, so they had worked with trans people regularly. But he had made a statement at some conference that this was the civil rights movement of transgender people. So they knew going into office that he definitely is on board with protections. And VP Harris comes from the state of California, which is leading in this country in protections for transgender Americans, and has never had a curve about protections for transgender Americans. So I think it's also a pushback against the federal administration that's made it clear that there will be no discrimination against transgender people in America. So state legislatures have been taking it upon themselves to give this pushback.
So is it lack of education? I mean, you went through the science and you've talked about the professional groups, the experts. What is driving this? I mean, what would cause individuals to have this bias, which is reflected in laws in certain states, in many states, and violence and the attacks that you mentioned at the beginning of the show? What is the mentality? I don't profess to understand it.
Wayne, you hit it on the head. It is fear. It is ignorance, and it's lack of education. I always use an example of my cousin, one of my cousins, who isn't well read. Actually, she got a high school diploma, but because she loves me, she can tell you everything about transgender people. And I mean in detail, from science to whatever. And she isn't internet savvy either, and has no curves. So it's lack.
So as Dr. Brodus said, there's not much difference in the advantage these transgender athletes have to their cisgender counterpart. Dr. Kyle Brodus also mentioned discrimination and the legislations that have been put in play for transgender athletes, and this is the Equality Act. This also goes on the scientific side as well, because it has been proven that there's not much difference in performance for transgender athletes competing against their cisgender counterpart. However, I believe there is a difference when transgender females are participating in these sports. I do feel that if one is born a male and then transgenders into a female, I do believe that there are differences in performance in these sports. However, this is also believed to be false by certain people. And these people, this is what makes this entire topic very controversial, because it is the people's thoughts that matter.